Hello friends and welcome to my channel and welcome to my very first episode in the hardest reading challenge you will ever do. So if you don't know what HRCYED is, I'm going to leave a couple of resources in the description box down below. Number one, Stephanie, she has created this wonderful, beautiful, amazing reading challenge that's very challenging, in fact, for us all to enjoy. So I'll link her announcement video for version 2. We are on technically the second year for the reading challenge. And then also Sarah at Freshly Read Books, she created some Canva graphics, which I am very jazzed to use. And then also I'm taking some ad inspo from the formatting of her episodes. So the way that my HRCYED episodes are going to go is I'm going to basically be doing these videos in place of a monthly reading wrap up. So at the end of every month, I'm going to share with you the books that I read during the month, what my thoughts were, what I rated it, all the usual wrap up things, but then I will also tell you what prompts I used the books for and why I picked the books up, all of those things in particular to HRCYED. So without further ado, let's talk about my very first book of August. I don't know why I was gonna say May. It's July. It's the first book of July. Send help. We're doing really well so far. Anyways, let's talk about my July books that I read for the Artist Reading Challenge you'll ever do. Okay, number one, I started the month off with The Lies of Lena. Now, I 100% sure had no plans on where I was going to put this into the reading challenge, and it was just a pure mood read. I just needed to pick up something just because I felt like it, which is generally how I do my reading. I'm not someone who usually sets a monthly TBR, though I did play around with setting a TBR in July, and you'll very quickly see I read not a singular book on my July TBR for a couple reasons. Number one, I did not read for an entire week while I was doing July Miss, and number two, I just didn't. So definitely trying to circle back to those books. However, July was entirely me. It was a mood read month. You get what I'm saying? So The Lies of Lena is where we started, and I felt like, you know, this is a good idea. I can plug it in wherever. I get really intimidated with reading challenges, readathons, all of those things where you can choose prompts, because I'm like, well, what if I want to use this for another prompt later? What if I want to read this here? So I just picked it up and was like, well, we'll see how it goes. So it went. So The Lies of Lena is a then and now story. It is a fantasy romance story in which we meet our two characters, Quill and Lena, when they are kids. They're very young. I think they're actually like 16 or so, so I guess define your definition of kids, but they're very young. They form this relationship really early on. It's very young love, very cutesy. There's definitely an element of forbidden love here because Lena is actually a mage, and mages in this world are not people don't like them very much. People don't like what they don't understand. Nobody understands magic, so obviously the people don't like the mages. So mages are definitely persecuted in this world. They're pretty much killed on sight. So Lena, she is one. She doesn't want to be one. She is fighting against the fact that she is one. She's got a lot of internal rage, and she happens to meet Quill. Quill is a human. She cannot tell Quill who she is, what's going on. So it sets up a lot of conflict from the early get-go, but also it's puppy, cutesy, young love. So the initial conflict is definitely the romance from the get-go, but then things changed. While this is not necessarily a book that I loved, I'm very intrigued by it. I do think the overall book suffered from both the execution. I didn't necessarily connect as well with the characters. I think for me that was the main point. And then the writing style didn't necessarily compensate for that. So I didn't necessarily connect with these characters super intensely, and I do think that is the majority of why I'm rating it a 3-star. It also, I don't love the then and now situation. I'm not someone who really enjoys a childhood friends to lovers, and the fact that the then took up almost like 57% of this book was just not something that was going to work for me personally. However, that being said, I do really have found a lot of interest in this book. I do think that the plot in general is very interesting to me. The magic system I'm very intrigued by, especially as from where we left off, I'm assuming that we're going to continue to learn more about the magic system. I'm very intrigued to see what more we learn. I also think that the plot dynamics and the overall political development that's about to occur is going to be intriguing. So overall, I'm intrigued. Book 1 is a very, very solid 3-star. That being said, now that we've gotten past the then elements in book 1, as we move on into book 2, I do think that it could work for me more later on. So I do think I will definitely be picking up The Sense of Silas, and I'm very hopeful that it will do some good things for me. I do wonder if, because I don't connect to the characters now, will I later connect to the characters? That is going to be a big fat question. However, the plot I'm very intrigued by, so I will definitely be continuing on into book 2, The Sense of Silas, and hopefully it will go better for me than book 1 now that we're past the then. However, we shall intact. Hopefully, let's see. So I did decide to use The Lies of Lena for number 1, the by the hundreds prompt. In order to complete the by the hundreds prompt, you are supposed to read 7 books with varying page lengths in increments of 100 from 1 to 700. So basically, I gotta read a book with 100 pages, 200, 3, 4, 5, 600 and 700 pages. So this book is going to count for our 400 slot. This book is 471 pages long. So that is the first prompt that I will be using this for. Number 2, I feel as if, given that we have some alliteration happening with the Lies of Lena, I have to use this for Elle in the A to Z challenge. So we have our first entry for the A to Z challenge, and we have our first entry for the by the hundreds prompt. Like I said, in a couple months, if I get down the line and I'm like, ooh, I really need to fill in a different spot, and I feel like the Lies of Lena could be better placed over here, I might scooch some things around, but this is where we're starting. So after I finished The Lies of Lena, I immediately had to dive into The Sense of Silas. If you would have watched my reading vlog for this particular book, this book took me through all kinds of emotions. I am shook. I quite literally, like, what just happened? What the freak just happened? I was like, ugh, I don't know about this. And then I was like, ugh, I think I'm gonna have to DNF this. This isn't getting better. And then, oh, this is getting better. So plot twists did occur. This book continues on in the narrative of The Lies of Lena, and things definitely get messy. They get messy. So messy, in fact, that I could not decide how I felt about this book in my brain. So I kind of had to give myself a couple days from finishing it to whenever I gave my final thoughts, and I still don't even know what the official final thoughts are. So that's cool. Okay, so I finished The Sense of Silas a couple of days ago, and I wanted to give myself some time to kind of marinate on this book, because when I initially finished it, my thoughts were so scrambled scrapped together. I don't know what the words I'm looking for here, because I was just like, how do I feel about this book? Because objectively, I had done a vlog update about 7% where I was like, I don't really know. Book 1 was kind of not the best for me. I really loved the story and where we were going, but the overall writing style I was not 100% into. And at 7%, I was like, hey, this is kind of the same thing. I feel like if I'm this far, maybe that's my sign that I needed to DNF. And then not but the next page, there was a plot twist, and the pacing for this book did not change from that whatsoever. We got plot twist after plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. Some of the very specific complaints that I had about some of the verbiage and writing style in book 1 was explained, and I'm not gonna say, maybe not fully explained, but there's some reasonings happening here. There's some greater things at play, and I'm not anxious. I'm not like getting up out of my seat to go run around a couple blocks until the next, year plus whenever we get the next book 3. I do think, however, that I definitely am going to be very excited to pick up book 3 when it does come out. So overall, some of the specific complaints that I had from book 1 had kind of gotten resolved. There were some more specific complaints that I did have about book 2. However, I do think that the plot, the storyline, what we're doing definitely overshadowed that. And quite frankly, I don't know what the editing process here has been, given that this is an indie, but I think if it was edited a bit more aggressively, this could really be something that I'm really into. The overall situation occurring in this book is that we in this world have soul ties, but usually when we see a fated mate trope, it is with people that are single, that don't really have any other people that they're with, and everything's good. They can just jump ship, abandon all, ye who enter here, and here's your mate. Great, cool. These people are not, they're some of them are married, some of them are otherwise entangled. Things just are they're messy. Like, that these characters are meant to be together, but they have to go through some things to get there. So this book is all about going through some things, and then we go through more things we have no answers for. I do think that overall the world building was done really well. I think that the magic system, we got such an expansion in this book, and I loved every single moment of the magic system. I'm not someone who typically likes stories about witches. This book is making me a fan of witches. I think that I was having a really good time reading this book. I think ultimately when I step back and think, hey, would I recommend this to somebody? I don't know that I necessarily would recommend this book to somebody, because at this point I really still feel like we're building to something. I feel like I wasn't obsessed with the beginning. I'm not someone who thinks that you need to read multiple books in a series to like the book. Like, if book 1's bad but book 2 is good, I don't think that that's great, right? No one would. So I have a hard time recommending this series just because book 1 was so not the book for me specifically, though I could see it working out for some people. But then book 2 I really liked, but it still wasn't like complete 5 stars. But I feel like where we're going is really exciting. So I do think if you're at all interested in this book, definitely pick it up. But if you're kind of, I don't know, you're on the fence, or maybe you just don't get to it, honestly, I think you're okay to wait for book 3, because I feel like book 3, and I said this about book 2, but I'm saying this again about book 3, so we'll see what that means later. I feel like book 3 is really going to be the determining factor in how much I overall enjoy the series. We are very much so building to something, and once we get there, the question is, hey, I have really been enjoying this process of building. Was it worth it? So we shall see when we get there. So in order to keep things a little bit easier for my brain here, I decided to use this book for the exact same prompts as Lies of Lena, which kind of actually works out because this book, I did not fully realize when I was reading this. I'm not someone who really looks at page counts of digital books, really ever, if I ever do, when I pick them up. This book, 786 pages long. That shook me. I was not prepared for that. I was very surprised by that moment when I found that out. It didn't really read very chunky, but because it was so fast paced and there were so many reveals that just kept happening, it felt like things were really moving, and I didn't really feel like it was a 786, nearly 800 page book. But regardless, it's going to count for our very last tier being the 700s prompt and our by the hundreds challenge. And then it will also count again with the alliteration. I had to use this for S in the A to Z challenge. So book 2, counting towards 2 prompts, 2 prompts, checking off the list, me doing that. Yay, go team, go. Anyways, so after I finished The Sense of Silas, I needed something. I needed something else. And I had actually already started The Robin on the Oak Throne. I read the teeniest amount in June when I very first picked this book up, and then I put it down to finish some other things, and I circled back to it. So this is the second book in the Oak and the Holly cycle series, with the first book being The Wren and the Holly Library. Now this book, I kind of wish that we were doing the local author prompts for version 2. I might bring that prompt back. I don't know, but that is because K.A. Lindy is actually a local author to me. I picked this book up at her author signing, got to listen to her little chit chats talking all about the book, and I think that was such a cool experience. One of the coolest things, if you ever have an opportunity to go to an author signing near you and get to hear them discuss their book, please do it, because it gives you so much more insight. And I think that I like this book so much more because I had some extra insight about the world, the plot, the characters, what we were going through. But in this world, we have the Oak King and we have the Holly King, which is based on a folklore tale that K.A. Lindy discovered when she was traveling abroad to Ireland. There are quite a few folklore elements that are brought into this series, quite a few different connections that we're making. But The Wren and the Holly Library takes place in a very post-war New York City, in which there were some monsters that got on the loose, started a war, and now we are living in the post-monster war monster treaty era. So our female main character, Kierce, she is a thief, and she has been making her living kind of just scrounging around, doing what she absolutely can, stealing what she needs to, and then she ends up stealing from the wrong person. But he takes one look at Kierce and says, you have a skill set that I need. And so now Kierce has been hired by Graves to steal some things, and we proceed to run around war-torn New York City in search of some certain objects, and we discover some things along the way. This book was absolutely a fun time. I wouldn't call it the best book in the whole world, but I definitely had a fun time reading it. This is technically a heist novel, so watching these characters set up this thing and then also execute this thing was very entertaining. And I think that was pretty much the extent of the plot. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the plot is super complex or anything. I do think that the romance portion of this book was what absolutely kept me reading. I am not someone who generally likes a heist. I've not really found a good heist book that I particularly enjoyed, though I do think that this one is probably about as close as I get. So I'm not entirely sure if I just don't like the heist or what, but this book I liked it a lot. This is definitely a solid 4-star for me. I would probably put it on the scale of a lower 4-star. However, the romance was it was real good. I did very much so enjoy it. I really also enjoyed watching the fairy tale and folklore elements being weaved into a world that is technically our world. This is a post-apocalyptic dystopian situation that's post-monster war, basically. It's like a post-war, but in our world, but there's also supernatural creatures. I did really enjoy watching that in this world, and I also really like the character growth that we had. Book 1, we very much so started in a place, and then book 2 was very much so a character growth style book. So I'm definitely intrigued to continue reading on in this series, once those books are actually published. So thank you, K.A. Lindy, for making me wait forever. When I finished book 1 in the series, I absolutely was so excited to get to book 2, and book 2 honestly didn't disappoint. Part of it I do think was because I had gotten some extra insight on the discussion that just made me really connect to the story and just have so much more fun for it and just be so excited about this book, because being excited was me. So I did in fact read this book. So I'm actually going to use this book in kind of a roundabout way. So this is going to be going towards the subgenres challenge. I'm actually going to count this as a fairy tale fantasy. I'm not someone who enjoys a very stereotypical fairy tale retelling. I don't tend to like cozy fantasies. Those tend to go more cozy. This has a lot of fairy tale elements in it though, and a large portion of the plot is based on folklore. So I'm going to be using this for the fairy tale fantasy prompt number 1. I think that the second prompt that I'm going to be using this book for is going to be the Even Bigger Rainbow Challenge. I know it's a really blue leaning purple, but it's purple. I feel like I don't read very many purple books, so I feel like I should go ahead and use this as the purple book, which I'm going to do. So with our third book, we have now put some tally marks into 2 new prompts, 2 new bingo spaces, 2 bingo board items, 2 tiles. What is it? A bingo board? It's a bingo board space. 2 new spaces on the bingo board for this reading challenge. Send help. After reading that book, I needed some cowboy romance in my life. I really did, which actually worked out really well for me because my library hold for Wild and Wrangled. Take one look at this cover, okay? Do I really need to give you much introduction as to what this book is about? Probably not. This is the 4th book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. We're following some people. They happen to have some connection to the ranch in which they are therefore cowboys, and they happen to fall in love. So this book features our final couple in the family. Kim actually had a child with Gus, who is one of the children of the owner of the ranch, who are now, you know, working the ranch actively. He is big cowboy, and she is connected to the family because they have a really good co-parenting relationship. So Kim just so happens to have been engaged to somebody. You can sense where this is going, and we meet her on their wedding day in which he didn't show up, and so she runs off and runs into her high school fling. So this book is second chance romance. It is childhood friends to lovers, which are 2 tropes that I generally do not like. However, this book actually really worked out for me. I have officially finished the Rebel Blue Ranch series, specifically Wild and Wrangled. I do think that I like this book a lot. I'm giving it a 4 stars. I do think that as far as the potential for me to like a childhood friends to lovers story is generally pretty low, this did it for me. I think a couple of factors overall played into my overall likement of this book. Number 1, the conflict and the reason that they broke up felt legitimate to me, and that was not the third act conflict. That was not the problem here. I do think that the third act conflict was kind of like, okay, like we get it. We're over it. Let's get back to being in love again. I do also think that there were surprising characters in this book, meaning that I didn't anticipate certain characters to have as pivotal of a role in that whole process as they ended up having. So I do think that this book ended up being a little bit surprising, even though we have read 3 books prior to this book by the same author in the same world in the same series with the same people. There's still something a little bit different about this book, and I think that I overall was appreciative about. Also, the little epilogue at the very end, I wasn't sure that we were going to get it because it happened after the acknowledgements, and when we got there, I was like, oh, oh, wait a minute. So overall, 4 stars. I also think that the series as a whole was a 4-star. There hasn't been any complete 5 stars for me in this series, but I have really enjoyed it. So as far as the prompts that I'm going to be using Wild and Wrangled for, I'm going to first use this for the by the hundreds prompt again. I think my goal is going to be to try to fill out this challenge first, and then we'll see where this takes us. But this book was 350 pages if you include the epilogue, but if you don't include the epilogue, it is 326 pages, so safely 300 pages. Hi, Editing Bailey here to say that Wild and Wrangled is the most W book that has ever lived, so I will in fact be using this as W in the A to Z challenge instead. Okay, that's all. Thank you so much. Back to regular scheduled programming. Number 2, I think I'm gonna stretch this one a little bit, and I think I want to try using this for the Even Bigger Rainbow Challenge. The Rainbow Challenge, you gotta read a book of every color of the rainbow. However, this year is a little bit harder because we've added some prompts, because apparently last year, according to QWERTY, it was too easy. So I think I'm gonna use this for the more than 7 colors prompt. Now hear me out. This is pretty colorful. Now when we go through and count these, we've got the blue of his shirt. He's got a red rose tattoo. He's got some green tattoos, but then there's also some green in the background. We got her black shirt. We got her brown hair. We got the pink sky, the yellow text. There's some orange in the sky too if you look really closely. There's some orange in her pants. So I think that gets us to 7, so I'm gonna count it. Then the 5th book that I read in the month of July was none other than The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillick. Now this is actually the Who Did This To You book club pick for the months of June and July, which if you didn't know what this book club is, it's a book club that I host over on Fable with Tori from Tori Between Pages. So I always have this book club linked in the description box down below. For next month, we just picked Arcana Academy, which I am so beyond to start, hopefully sooner rather than later. However, The Night and the Moth is a medieval inspired gothic fantasy romance in which our main character, Six, is one of 6 diviners. Now, diviners, they do some fancy little dreaming things in order to see some omens, and you better hope that they are telling you some good omens, because in fact in this book they found out some omens for the king that weren't so good. We also meet our main male character, who is Rory, who happens to be a knight. What is so interesting about this book is that knights are typically noble, honorable, reverential, super loyal, super great, super knight in shining armor, kind of, you know, knights. So Rory in this book, he just happens to not be that. He's very irreverential. He takes one look at our diviner friend and he was like, I don't really believe in your little witchy voodoo magic over here. I'm gonna see myself out. And Six, our female main character, is kind of like, you suck. And then some things happened in which they are brought together because Sybil is one of 6 diviners, right? The other 5 diviners start to go missing and she needs to figure out how the heck she's going to figure out where her sisters are. So this book is part medieval gothic fantasy romance, part murder mystery, part comedy, because we have some gargoyles in here that are just very silly goofy. We have finally made it to the point at which the diviners start to go missing. They have a really strong sisterhood friendship bond, and oh no, they're starting to go missing. What do we do? So up until this point, it is now making sense to me why I have been feeling like this book has been going kind of slow, and why I have been reading it slowly, and why I've been kind of not necessarily wanting to pick this up, because we're supposed to have this moment in which we are developing the friendship and making us as a reader be convinced of their sisterhood, their bond, that they love each other, that oh no, it is bad, that they are going missing. The fact that it has taken us 22% of the way through this book to get here feels like a lot. Like, we have done a good amount of things. We have set up the initial like magic system. We have watched the like divining process, even though it still doesn't like fully make sense to me, and maybe that's because I am listening to the audiobook and not fully eyeball reading this. We have also met our main male character. He is very reverential and kind of just like you read the omens, not that I don't take them seriously, but like, ew. Like, he just rubs her the wrong way because everything that she does and says is he kind of like doesn't really give a frig. So I'm not going to lie, there have been some really fun moments that I have been just like, oh, this is me having good time, me having good time. I do, however, think that this book is maybe not the book that I need to be reading at this moment, and I think it's partial. I'm not in a reading slump. I do think that I am currently suffering from what everyone is suffering in the fact that it is summer, and I feel like pretty much everyone slows down their reading in the summer, and I'm definitely feeling that at the moment. And because I couldn't quite figure out what even was going on, I wasn't really like wanting to pick this book up, just because I was like, okay, now I have to read this audiobook. So I don't think that this is a book that I need to be reading in this moment. However, now that we have gotten past the slowness, now we start to get into some of the actiony things that we actually like. I actually know what's happening here. I'm thinking that I'm going to have a much better time with the next portion of this book. So I'm hopeful. It could go one of many ways technically, but really one of 2 ways in particular. One in which I'm like, okay, so still nothing's happening and I'm not connecting, or now that we're starting to get into it, we could get into it. So TBD. Okay, so I have finished The Night and the Moth. Had I read this at a different time, I think I would have liked it better. I'm not in a reading slump. I just think that July has been a really weird month. I do think that I liked so many individual elements of this book. We've got the knight who's noble, but not really noble because he like is just a sucky knight, but like also the part that makes him a sucky knight is the part that our diviner is just gonna cling on to, and it's the part of him that she needs the most. There's something about the writing style and the overall pacing of Rachel Gillig's books in general, with this now being actually the 3rd. I don't know when 3 books happened, but apparently we're 3 books into Rachel Gillig, which I love. I think that her style of writing is not the kind of writing that you need to be reading when reading is kind of hard. Like, it's not a reading slump friendly kind of book. I'm not in a reading slump, and I'm gonna say it again, especially not now because I'm very excited for August and all the books that I'm about to read in the next couple of weeks. However, when I'm feeling less inclined to read, something that I need is more fast-paced, more very specific and very clear, very easy to understand plot and purpose, as opposed to something like this where it is a little bit, I'm not gonna say that it's slower, but it's more poetic and pretty in the writing style, which hits sometimes, and right now I just wasn't in the mood for that to hit. I do also think that the narrators with like an English accent, for some reason I just don't love. I think I had the same issue with On Wings of Blood when I DNF'd it. I just didn't love the narrators much, so I should have eyeball read this. And you guys also know I'm a slow burn queen. I'm a slow burn stan. I love slow burn. I slow burn over fast burn every single day of my life. However, for some reason I needed more fast pace, and I think that's just where I'm at. So I think everything that all the complaints that I had about this book was because of where my head is at mentally right now. So obviously I had to read this book for book club, so I couldn't just like put it down, but I do think that if I were able to put it down, that might have given me a better overall thing. So I honestly didn't necessarily enjoy this book a whole ton, but there are individual moments that I loved so much. Like anything that it came to the night, I loved Rory. Rory was iconic. 6 as a female main character, I think she was probably most of my problem. Like, I get that I was supposed to be connected to her, but I just don't think that I really was. I think I also had a hard time visualizing all of the omens and like what the whole goal was here. So I think that was all just in my brain and like how I was conceptualizing everything. So I think I'm going to give this a 3-star. This is definitely in the lower 3-star, and it was varying on like 2.5 star, but I had to give it a 1/2 star at minimum for Rory and also the gargoyle. And I do think that I just was not reading this at the correct time in my brain. So I'm definitely still very excited for book 2, and especially the ending. I wasn't expecting the ending. Now, taking one look at this cover, she's very blue, is she not? So I'm going to use her for the blue entry on the Even Bigger Rainbow. Then I'm also going to be using this book for the gothic fantasy subgenre in the subgenre of choice challenge. There are knights, there are gargoyles. We're divining things. She's drowning. She's like doing some things in her diviner role. So this is honestly the most perfect depiction of a gothic fantasy. And then that brings us to our 6th and final book that I read in the month of July, and that is none other than The Witch's Fate by Will Winters, which I'm gonna put a picture here instead of using this picture. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I solely picked this book up so that way I could finish the new releases prompt. For this particular bingo space, we are supposed to read a new release for every single month. In version 1, we're supposed to read it within the same month, but then for version 2 we have 60 days to read it. So as long as I read the book for July within 60 days of that book coming out, it counts. However, I have been really not on top of my new releases lately, and I want to be better at that, so I'm going to challenge myself to be reading books within the same month. Unfortunately, I challenged myself to that, and then we got to the very last day in July and I just wasn't in a reading mood, and I was like, oh, I gotta find something here. So I did a little bit of research and I found a 160-page book that could work for this challenge, which is great because it was like 8 p.m. and I needed to finish the book in one day. In order to work in this prompt. We're starting off this reading challenge really well, but we actually did, because I finished this book. And present me here is going to give you my thoughts on this book because I did just finish it. I solely picked this book up in order to meet this prompt on time, and I very much so, that was kind of the whole benefit to this book for me, and that was about it. So this book is mixing the elements of, you got a wolf, werewolf, shifter, paired with a witch romance, and you kind of get the benefits of both. Like if you like books about witches and you like books about werewolves, they're married in this book. However, this is only a 160-page long book. I think that for that page length, we really got to develop more than I thought we did. But at the same time, especially in the beginning, I don't think the beginning was written like super well. Like it very much so was written like this is just a short, sweet, we read it, we move on, and we put it aside kind of thing. But then also the spice itself, it was interesting. However, the plot, and I feel ridiculous for talking about plot in a 160-page spice intended book. The plot actually I really liked. Like I think that we had some really good setup and we had some really good interesting developments happening here, some very interesting justifications for the way that we were doing. With werewolf romance, a lot of times it's like they sent their mate and they're all signs a go. But for the witches, there's not that same trope. The author was able to kind of match that energy on the witch's side towards the wolf, was actually really interesting. But our main male character was cursed. Basically somebody told him that he will never have a wolf mate. And that's just because his mate was supposed to be a witch over here. But our witch over here, her whole coven tragically was unalived in a war, and so she is very much living her recluse life in a cottage, hiding away from everybody. She's too powerful to really just like be around humans, but also her sisters, she can't replace them, right? But then they ended up finding each other. The overall vibes was actually really sweet. It oddly enough reminded me of, what is that book called by Grace Draven? But it's very like wholesome, sweet. oddly enough, people from two different factions coming together and being like, oh, we are the same. Now, I do think that this book could be a fun book to put into a readathon, but I do think there are other books of the same page length that have better spice, that are just, I don't know, better too. But I did, however, read this. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't necessarily good. So I ended up giving it a 3-star. It wasn't like offensive, but I just didn't love it. There wasn't anything that I read that I was like, ugh, which honestly, recently I have been having a lot of emo moments in books I've been reading, so at least there is that. Witch's Fate was a book that I read, and a book that I will be using for 2 prompts. Number 1, this is 160 pages long, so I'm going to be using it for the hundreds, which I was kind of concerned finding a book that page length because I'm not somebody who frequently reads novellas. So we're going to use it, thankfully. And then I'm also going to be, obviously we picked this up as a new release, so I'm going to be using it for the July new release slot. So anyways, that is all of the books that I read in the month of July. We have 6 books towards the hardest reading challenge you will ever do, and 12 individual books checked off of the overall reading challenge. So all in all, July was not the most best reading month for me, but it also wasn't, well, it very well may have been, I wouldn't call it the best. I wouldn't call it the worst, but it may end up being the worst. I don't know. We shall see. Hopefully it is the worst, because I would love to have an amazing reading year following this month in the last, technically we're through the first month in the last half of the year, but for the rest of the last half of the year, hopefully things keep going better. We'll take it. Anyways, if you have made it to the end of this video and you wanted to let me know that you were here, go ahead and leave a moth emoji for the Knight and the Moth. Maybe a little sword action, maybe a little medieval whatever emojis you can find to channel this energy. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for future installments in the hardest reading challenge you will ever do, and then also future vlogs of me reading all of these books and, you know, just all the good stuff that happens over here on my channel. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day or night wherever you are, and I will catch you in the next one.